Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar exploring findings from American Farmland Trust's recently released Farms Under Threat 2040, Choosing an Abundant Future for Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Before we get started, let me run through some quick logistics, and here you can see the agenda for our hour together. Everyone has been muted, so no need to worry about background noise. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, you can do so by going to the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. At the top of that panel, you see an orange arrow. If the control panel is missing, click on that orange arrow and it'll pop it out. And conversely, to push it in and get it out of the way, you click that little arrow again. When the control panel is fully out, you see a section that says questions. If you want to ask a question, you simply click on the square box on the right-hand side of that section. It'll pop that piece out, allowing you to write in a question. Similarly, if you pop out the thing just below, which says handouts, you will have a link to the full report that has all of the national information we're providing, as well as state-specific handouts for the 3 states. So we encourage you to look at that, and we will be talking about those as we go along. Lastly, we are recording this webinar. We will be sending out a recording to everybody who is registered. If you would like to share that with others, please do so. The more folks who see this and are aware of the challenges facing these three states, the better. So let me start by introducing myself and my co-host. I'm Chris Coffin. I direct American Farmland Trust's National Agricultural Land Network, which was created a couple of years ago to build the capacity of folks around the country to help save farm and ranch land, and that is through permanent protection, through better planning and local zoning, and through approaches in between and beyond. With me, I will talk a little bit more about the network toward the end. I'm also AFT's Senior Policy Advisor, and I specialize in policy related to farmland protection, to land access and farm transfer, and to farm viability. With me as my co-host is Billy Van Pelt. Billy is AFT's Director of Special Program Development and Senior Advisor. Billy is a licensed landscape architect and has been working on land use and farmland protection for over 25 years. Thank you for joining, Billy. And before I turn it over to Billy, for those of you not familiar with American Farmland Trust, let me take a minute to tell you about ourselves. We are a national nonprofit membership organization founded in 1980. We are the only national agricultural land trust, and we do, in fact, protect land through our land projects division. Some know us best by our bumper sticker, "No Farms, No Food," there on the bottom left. But we had a bumper sticker before that that said, "It's not farmland without farmers." And we understand agriculture. We take a holistic approach to it. Our national initiatives and our regional programs focus not just on protecting the agricultural land base, but on the practices used on the land and on the farmers and ranchers who steward that land, both the farmers who are on there now and those who aspire to be on in the future. Our programs and research inform our state and federal policy advocacy and analysis. We work from farm fields and kitchen tables to the halls of state capitals and Congress, and we have 6 regional offices and a national office located in Washington, D.C. And with that, let me turn it over to Billy.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you to everyone joining this webinar today. We would like to recognize and thank USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service for their partnership and their financial support of our Farms Under Threat research. Farms Under Threat is AFT's multi-year initiative to document the status of and threats to America's agricultural land base. NRCS has been invaluable to this entire research project, as has our research partner, Conservation Science Partners. For this report, we also collaborated with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So right now, I'd like to turn things back over to Chris.
Great, thanks. Now, Billy and I are going to go off camera so that you all can see the charts and again, the maps later in a fuller form. So we're starting right in on the methodology and findings from the report. The first two Farms Under Threat reports we did, Farms Under Threat, State of America's Farmland, released in 2018, and Farms Under Threat, State of the States, which we released in 2020. Mapped past conversion of agricultural land, looking first from 1996 to 2012 and then from 2001 to 2016. In this report, we're looking forward. We're using past conversion data to model and predict future conversion of farm and ranch land out to 2040. We started with our Farms Under Threat State of the State analysis of conversion from 2001 to 2016. As a reminder, that analysis mapped conversion of land to two different types, urban and high density development and low density residential development. So let's talk about those two types of development for a moment. Urban and highly developed land is the traditional culprit in farmland conversion. It's been mapped and it's been tracked for many years. It includes residential, commercial, and industrial areas typically found in and around cities and towns. It also includes rural industrial sites such as oil and gas infrastructure and solar development. Anything that can be identified by satellite remote sensing as built up. Low density residential development has become a more pervasive culprit in farmland conversion. And AFT worked with Conservation Science Partners to pioneer an approach to map and quantify the impacts of this type of development on the agricultural land base. These low-density residential areas range from lower-density subdivisions to larger farmettes and ranchettes. Typically, this kind of scattered large lot housing fragments the agricultural land base and makes production harder for the farms and ranches that remain. It's important to note that some agriculture can be found in this low-density residential land use. And in fact, we know that smaller farm parcels, particularly on the outskirts of urban areas, can be quite profitable and sustainable. However, our research has found that once land has been converted to low-density residential use, it is far more likely to be further converted to urban and highly developed land. So, starting with our historical data, we projected into the future with this business as usual scenario. And this we made a straight line projection using the same annual conversion rate as what we documented in State of the States from 2001 to 2016 to predict the level and location of conversion by 2040. We adjusted the model to account for projected population growth or decline. Building off that business as usual scenario, we developed two alternative scenarios, and we'll get to those two in a minute. In each of the three scenarios, we also mapped the coastal flooding risk that is projected by sea level rise. Once we had our projection of conversion and flooding risk, we quantified the effects of these scenarios in two ways. One based on the agricultural land type. So is the conversion more likely to be on cropland or pasture land or woodland, as well as on the quality of the land being impacted. And for that, we used our productivity, versatility, and resilience index that we created in our 2020 Farms Under Threat report. As with any modeling exercise, there are some caveats. Most importantly, we were not able to account for local zoning. Land use regulations are inherently local and there's no national database. This means that our maps represent the general pattern and rough amount of conversion that is likely based on those 2001 to 2016 conversion patterns. They do not reflect what may be allowed or prohibited on the ground through local land use regulations. Our modeling also does not include the impact of water scarcity and potential fallowing of land because of water scarcity or salinization. Mapping this impact involves a complex interplay of many variables and was beyond the scope of our analysis. You'll see in the web app, though, when we get there, that we did include a data overlay from World Resource Institute's Aqueduct, which offers some projections about water availability in the future. So here are the three scenarios we modeled. First, this business as usual, as we talked about. Again, that's a straight line projection out to 2040. The second is what we call runaway sprawl. This envisions a scenario where sprawl actually gets worse from business as usual, which we think is entirely possible given high housing costs in many urban areas and more opportunities for remote work, which will continue to be improved as rural broadband expands. Some parts of the country may already be on this runaway sprawl trajectory. Lastly, we modeled the future we hope for, better built cities. This scenario envisions successful efforts to reduce the footprint of residential, commercial, and industrial development on productive ag land. While the scenario still results in the conversion of some farmland, it envisions a future with vibrant, compact cities and towns and abundant farm and ranch land to meet the needs of the future. So a really quick look at the assumptions that went into the three scenarios. You see here, business as usual, as I talked about, it is that historical rate of conversion. We adjusted that historical rate for future population growth only for urban and highly developed land. That's because there's a strong correlation we have found between population growth and urban and high density development. In runaway sprawl, we left that rate of conversion the same for urban and highly developed land, but we increased significantly that rate of sprawl conversion, that low density residential land conversion, to 50% higher than the scenario above. And lastly, on better built cities, we modeled what we hoped could happen, a 50% reduction in that low density residential conversion rate and a 25% lower rate of conversion of land to urban and highly developed uses. So with that, now let's talk about and look at what each scenario's potential impact might be. You see here on the left, the gray is the 11 million acres that were converted nationally just in the first 16 years of this century. You see here then under the three scenarios that we could see anywhere from 18.4 million to 24.4 million of potential and projected conversion under these two scenarios, and conversely, a reduction to just 11 million acres if we are able to build more compactly. You may be thinking, 11 million acres is still a lot. Is that really the best case scenario? AFT appreciates that development, including renewable energy development, is necessary, and the need for affordable housing options is acute. While it may be possible for cities and towns to be even more compact in their growth, and we hope they will be, we chose what we believe is a realistic scenario. These next two slides we hope are helpful in showing how Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi compare to other states. This slide shows the total projected areas, projected acres of conversion. And obviously, given the size and scale of agricultural land in the southwest part of the country, you see that's the darkest portion and the most projected acres of conversion. However, you will see that in these three states, particularly looking at this, that Alabama has quite a bit of red on it. So this next slide, we look at the percent of agricultural land in each county that is projected to be developed. And again, you see here now more conversion on the eastern half of the US, in part because the acreages involved are smaller and the percents are higher. And again, you see quite a bit of darker red in all three of the states we're talking about. So this next slide is a chart of the top 12 most impacted states in the country. This is not a chart it's not a top 10, top 12 that you really want to see your state on. And here you see that Alabama is 10th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think I counted wrong. I think it's 9th amongst states in the projected total acres lost to development at 545,000 acres projected in the business as usual and over 750,000 under runaway sprawl. Another key finding relates to impacts on our very best agricultural land. For previous reports, AFT created the first ever index of agricultural land quality that looked at the productivity, versatility, and resiliency of land, or what we called PBR value. Land over a certain PBR value we consider to be nationally significant land. So that's land which is best suited for long-term cultivation and food production. While this land is concentrated in certain parts of the country, every state has some nationally significant land. What we find in our future projections is the conversion of this land is likely to be higher than conversion of all ag land, likely because for the same reason it is productive, in that it is flat, it is well drained, it's relatively free of rocks, it makes it easily developed. The loss of this land is especially concerning. This is land that can produce the highest yields of crops and livestock with the least environmental impacts. Our modeling shows that nearly half of the projected conversion from 2016 to 2040 will occur on nationally significant land, even though it represents less than 40% of the agricultural land base. The more nationally significant land converted, the more reliant we become on marginal land for food production. And to put this potential loss of 9 million acres of nationally significant land in perspective, the total acreage of land in the US devoted to all fruit and nut and vegetable production is just 10.4 million acres. So this is another top 12 list you don't want to see your state on. And you see here that both Alabama and Mississippi show up on the list. This is acres of nationally significant agricultural land that is projected for conversion. Alabama with projected conversion of 337,200 acres of its most productive land, and Mississippi with 292,400 acres of its most productive land. And we'll be able to see more about the location of this conversion when we get into the interactive website. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Billy to talk through the next few slides. I hope I'm turning it over to Billy.
He might be on mute.
Billy, if you are on mute, we know that he was having to switch on his technology. I'm going to give him one more minute and then I'll keep going. Okay, well, Billy, hopefully you'll join us. And if you are on mute, just come on off and interrupt me. So this next finding that we want to highlight relates to coastal flooding as a result of projected sea level rise. We mapped what this might look like in 2040 based on 7.5 inches of additional sea level rise. We found that 450,000 acres of farmland and ranchland nationally could be flooded by 2040, including 73,000 acres in Louisiana. This number does not include salinization of soils and groundwater, which will jeopardize many more acres even before land is inundated. Additionally, we found that nearly 500,000 acres of existing urban and highly developed land and low-density residential land will be flooded nationally, causing more people to move inland to seek more stable housing. The result could be another 2.7 million acres of agricultural land nationally that could be converted to development. And
hey, Chris, I'm with you now.
Okay, so now I'm turning it to you to talk about solar.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for covering that important information about sea level rise that is not only impacting the land itself, but is impacting future growth patterns with inland migration, putting further pressure not only on our urban areas to expand, but on our most productive, versatile, and resilient soils. One of the other threats we are highlighting with this report is the threat that solar development poses to agricultural land. To be clear, American Farmland Trust supports renewable energy development. However, we think it's essential that we plan carefully so that our most productive, versatile, and resilient land is not compromised. We also think it's possible for agriculture and solar to coexist in mutually beneficial ways. This map shows the projected acres of utility-scale solar photovoltaics energy generation facilities by state in 2040. This data comes from the decarbonization with electrification scenario of the U.S. Department of Energy's Solar Future Study. That study estimates that there will need to be 7.4 million acres of utility-scale solar in place by 2040 to meet the Biden administration's energy goal. And as you can see by looking at this map, there is a concentration of the development of this of solar energy in the Southeast, and just bringing that to your attention. We did model conversion of land to solar development, but did not include that data layer in this report because of questions about the data. There is some information about the solar modeling results in our solar technical paper that is available through the Farmland Information Center, and we'll be sharing that website address later. We will also be releasing a solar white paper later this year. The most important information and findings were that 83% of the projected solar development by 2040 will be sited on agricultural land, and nearly half of the projected solar will be sited on nationally significant land. We are now going to dive into the data available for all three states on the interactive website, and for this, we are going to be joining our colleague, Beth Frazier, who will be our navigator. Thank you, Beth.
Great, thanks so much, Billy, and thank you, Beth. So when you start here, you come to this cover information sheet, tells you a little bit about what we did, what we found, what you can do, very short and sweet information. To get out of this, you just click that X up there on the right-hand side. And while we're looking on the upper right-hand side of the website, let's talk a little bit about these other tabs that are up there. And I'm getting some background noise. Okay, so when you look at the About, that brings you back to that cover information. Again, you can just X right out of there. Next to that About, up there on the right hand upper corner, you see a How-To tab. That takes you to a 5-minute video that explains how to use the various data layers and what is in the data layers in the scenarios. The View Report tab takes you to our Farmland Information Center, where Beth has just taken us, and you can see here you have access to the full report, to the executive summary, to that solar technical report we mentioned, and as well to our prior State of the States report. We are making our geospatial data layers available to the public. If you would like them, again, that Request Data tab up there on the far right-hand side takes you to this form. Just fill it out and we will be back in touch. So with that, we're going to dive right in, and Beth is going to take us to Alabama first. And how you get there is you click on the state, And once you click on the state, you will see down below that statistics about Alabama statewide come up on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side here is Shelby County, which happened to be the county that Beth's cursor was on when she clicked on Alabama. So what's useful here is that you see a summary for both the state data and for the county data of the type of land that we are showing as being converted or threatened by conversion, and into what kind of development. So Alabama, again, you see the 545,000 acres projected for conversion total. That dark red or rust on the left-hand side is the urban and highly developed land. The lighter orange is the low-density residential development. So you can see that in Alabama, much more of the projected conversion is to that low-density residential development. In Shelby County, again, what is very useful about this report is that we are providing county-level data and doing that in this type of way so that you can see the potential impacts of the type of conversion. And again, Shelby has more urban and highly developed land projected than Alabama as a whole. So let's go down just a little bit to scroll and see what else this information provides. Here you see that we look at the acres of Alabama's best agricultural land. That is the upper half of our PVR values and what we consider to be more productive agricultural land. And you see here that for, again, it's by the state and the county, and in Alabama that it's almost 355,000 acres of Alabama's better quality farmland that is likely to be converted. And when you look down further, you see the split by land type. And again, here you see that cropland is the largest amount of likely conversion, followed by pasture land, followed by woodland. And a note about this woodland is that in 2020, we modeled a way of identifying woodland associated with a farm or a ranch. So this woodland conversion is not all forest land conversion in Alabama. It is simply what we are projecting as the acres of woodland that are affiliated with a farm in Alabama that are likely to be converted. And when you look down here, what I mentioned about low density residential land use paves the way for future development. In Alabama, statewide, our research finds that land that is in this low density residential land use in 2016 is 6 times more likely to be converted to urban and highly developed land by 2040. So let's take a minute to show you how to download the 2-page reports, and this holds true for the other 2 states, and we are going to show you those as well. But here for Alabama, you see this nice 2-pager, easily printed, easily downloaded, easily shared, and we hope again that folks will use this as an educational tool for conversations with lawmakers, policymakers, agency folk, community planners, you name it. And again, you see some of the information here, that 545,000 acres. But one of the things that's useful here is that what we did was to translate that likely loss of acres into what that means in terms of loss of number of farms and economic output and jobs. And here you see that it's the equivalent of losing 3,300 farms in the state, 329 million in farm output, and potentially 5,600 jobs in the agricultural sector that could be lost. And those are all numbers that have been derived from data in the 2017 Census of Agriculture. And looking down, and we did this for each of the 3 states, you'll see hardest hit counties. And these again are the counties that show the largest amount of projected conversion. So please, we hope that folks will come back in when you have a minute, look at these in further depth. But right now, I'm going to hand it to Billy, and he is going to first, with Beth's help, zoom into a couple of counties in Alabama, and then we are going to go west.
Thank you, Chris. And we're going to start with Alabama, and we're going to go to Madison County with the help of our colleague Beth Fraser. So I think it's important at this point, we've already looked at the summary for this state, but if we could look at the legend, Beth, you could open up the legend so our attendees can see what all patterns look like. It's really important to show that our green is our productive, versatile, and resilient farmland, and our dark gray, these are our urban areas. And Beth, if you could go on the left and pull down runaway sprawl, and you see the proliferation of development through 2040 with the runaway sprawl there in the orange. And then if we could pull down the better built city on the right, you'll see a huge difference. So there's really no comparison. The development patterns are clear. The sprawl, which AFT has done over 80 cost of community services studies over the last 40 years, and they say the same thing. Sprawl uses more in services than it pays in taxes. So building in a contiguous way, not sprawling out, not only is good for your city and county budget, it's most importantly good for our farmland. So if we could now west, we're going to go to Mississippi, and we're going to be in Madison County again in Mississippi. And while Beth is navigating over there, I'd like to draw your attention to the Mississippi summary available for you to see. And here in Mississippi, I think it's important to note that based on recent trends, it looks like up to 513,000 acres could be developed or compromised. And, you know, losing over 2,000 farms and the economic impact of the loss of 218 million in farm output and over 4,000 jobs. In addition, as Chris was noting earlier, 57% of this conversion would occur on Mississippi's nationally significant land. So Beth, if you could take us to Madison County, Mississippi, we could look. And coming in there again, looking at our green, our most productive, versatile, and resilient soils with a runaway sprawl scenario on the left, and on the right, better built city. So you can see how the growth patterns go typically along road and interstate corridors, and they really start to bring together all these outlying communities, begin crawling together, growing together, and that's a problem. And when we talk about better built city, we talk about each city growing in such a way that it is compact, it is smart growth, and that there's a plan for permanent farmland in each community. And we're going to get into that in just a bit. So now if we move over to Louisiana, we're going to move over to Louisiana now and focus in on Ascension County. And I'd like to take a look at our map here and our stump, and looking at the coastline of Louisiana that's clearly that's available for you all to see. Louisiana is going to face significant sea level rise and inland migration, and it's clear from our data, especially if we can zoom out a bit, Beth, for this part of the presentation, so we can see the relationship to the coast. Yes, thank you. So you see that sea level rise. Not only is there an impact on our most productive, versatile, and resilient soils in the literal sense, there will be people moving out of these urban areas along the coastline, further threatened
inland farms and productive, versatile, and resilient soils. So if we could go back to, please, Beth, and taking a look there.
Go back into Ascension.
And zoom in. We're looking at, again, runaway sprawl on the left and better built cities on the right. And so we can see, look at all of that orange. I mean, in this scenario, runaway sprawl is almost completely absorbing all of the remaining productive, versatile, and resilient. The better built city, as we zoom out, you can see the real contrast. There's much more green remaining. And you can see by the bar graph on the slide that there is a less than about half the land from the runaway sprawl scenario to the better built city scenario. So I hope that this has been helpful. This is a very quick overview. As Chris mentioned, we really hope that you use all of these summaries to educate your elected and appointed officials, but also to use these resources for your planning staffs, if there is a planning staff, or through a GIS person that may be working for the county that you're in, to use our shapefiles, use our data layer, so that your elected and appointed officials can make better land use planning decisions in the future about how they want to grow. So at this point, I'd like to turn things back over to Chris, but thank you, Beth.
Great, thank you, Billy. We are going to show one thing. I just want to show this report for Louisiana, just so that, again, folks can see it. And again, looking at that potential economic impact of the loss, projected loss of farmland, more than 3,500 jobs, 123 million in lost farm output, and potentially the loss of 1,700 farms. And again, you see here the 3 counties most impacted. And again, we hope that you will find these 2-pagers very useful to share. So with that, thank you, Beth, thank you, Billy. And now that we've discussed the findings, we just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about action. So what can each of us do to help choose an abundant future? Our report has policy recommendations in each of these 4 categories and at every level of government. If you are a county or a municipal official, a state legislator, a state agency employee, a planner, a congressional staffer, we hope you'll find a recommendation in here that you would like to champion. Please let us know if we can provide you with any additional information about any of the policy ideas in the report. If you are a farmer, a rancher, a landowner, a community advocate, you work for a farm or conservation organization, we encourage you to share and discuss these recommendations with your elected and agency representatives and partners. So let me just highlight a few of the things that we discuss in the recommendations. Under encouraging smart growth and compact development require a foundation of good local planning. Each of these 3 states have slightly different approaches to local planning, but all allow local or regional comprehensive plans. And we encourage these kinds of plans, and we encourage folks to be involved in these planning processes. At the local level, engaging in the drafting and the review process is critically important. And we encourage states to invest and encourage this type of comprehensive planning as well. Protecting agricultural land. Congress will be writing a new farm bill next year. An important program in that bill is the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, which helps to fund the purchase of agricultural conservation easements from willing farmers and landowners. More funding for that program would help protect more farmland in all 3 of these states. Advanced smart solar siting. Local governments can work to focus that solar siting on the built environment, on marginal lands, and can ensure that when solar is on farmland, that best practices are followed. That includes best practices for the construction of the facilities, the operation of them, and the decommissioning, all to preserve soil health, water resources, and the ability to farm the land during and after the life of the project. States can also invest in additional research around agrivoltaics or dual-use solar and provide incentives for dual-use solar development. And lastly, supporting farmland access. State and local governments can develop their own or help to fund nonprofit farm link programs. These are programs that work with both farmers and landowners who are looking for a successor or someone to lease their land, as well as working with farm seekers who are looking for land to lease or buy. This technical assistance is very important. Customized technical assistance can be extremely valuable in keeping farmland in farming. And now I'm going to turn it back to Billy, who's going to talk a little bit about planning for agriculture and smart growth.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that overview. Let me just say that community planning is critically important for smart growth. As part of planning, American Farmland Trust encourages communities to plan proactively for agriculture. This involves these 4 basic principles that you see here on this slide. These are principles that can work in tandem with efforts to plan for smarter, more compact development. Many resources on planning for agriculture can be found on our Farmland Information Center website, and we hope that you'll check them out. Let me also talk through a few others. So if you look at planning for agriculture in the same way that we plan for urban development, we want to inventory all of our resources in the rural area. We want to inventory our most productive, versatile, and resilient soils, and that's where AFT's data can come in and help there because it is county level data. We want to look at scenic view sheds and cultural and historic assets, blue line streams, aquifers, and all of those things that are the unique attributes of the rural area that contribute to agricultural production, that contribute to agribusiness and to agritourism, all of those things. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So some smart growth strategies, these are not prescriptive. These are some best practices that we're sharing with you today. American Farmland Trust is aware that not every community has planning and zoning, but these are some best practices that communities may want to consider as not only as they plan for their urban areas, but quite frankly, as they plan for their rural areas, because the two are really hand in glove. Having an urban growth boundary that defines the area where you are going to have non-agricultural development and provide key city services and infrastructure. This goes directly to our cost of community services studies of having compact contiguous development to reduce the impact on the taxpayer of providing services that are far flung away from the city center. Agricultural zoning is very important. Ag zoning allows for activities that support agricultural production, agribusinesses, and agritourism, and prohibits non-agricultural uses. Large lot minimum sizes in rural areas and agricultural areas. This goes to what Chris was talking about earlier with low density residential development. The large lot subdivisions are just large lots that have been carved up along rural roads where they're just big house lots. They're really not agricultural units. This is not a one size fits all approach. it will be unique to each community as to what they consider a viable agricultural unit that can produce enough on-farm income to support that operation. Next is farmland protection programs. These exist across the nation, either at the state level or the local level. And American Farmland Trust has been involved in forming over 100 PACE and purchase of agricultural conservation easement and PDR, purchase of development rights programs across the nation. In this scenario, the local or state entity would purchase from a voluntarily from a farm owner, purchase a conservation easement on the land. They are not purchasing the land in fee simple. They are only purchasing a restriction on the land in the form of a deed of conservation easement so that the land stays in agriculture forever. This is a good way to diversify your income, quite candidly, by selling a conservation easement. It allows the farm owner to reinvest those funds to build barns, to build fences, to increase their agricultural infrastructure, such as water lines or waterers in their fields, to perhaps have some farm roads that are built on the farm to help farmers get around, or to pay down debt, or to buy more land. So those are the ways that selling an easement can work. Now, land trusts, the next bullet point, they function a little bit differently. Land trusts typically take and hold donated conservation easements. Again, you're not donating the land, you're donating a restriction on the land in the form of a conservation easement. These are perpetual, which means they run with the title of the land in perpetuity. These are also voluntary. There are significant federal income tax benefits to donating a conservation easement, and you should consult with your own attorney or financial advisor as to what that might be and how that may or may not impact you in your particular unique situation. Donating conservation easements also will lower the estate taxes to your heirs. And these are typically done through land trusts that are privately funded. And these AFT has been involved in forming over 40 of these across the nation over our 4 decades of operation. AFT does affiliate with land trusts that we have either helped form or that we have a close programmatic working relationship with to share resources and to help promote the work of that land trust. AFT is a land trust. Typically, we don't hold conservation easements where there are existing boots on the ground, but rather we partner with those entities. But if there's not a viable entity, or the donor of the conservation easement is more comfortable donating an easement to American Farmland Trust because it's a holistic agricultural organization, we could certainly talk to that landowner and see what their goals are for conserving their land. And then lastly, having a goal for permanent farmland protection in the comprehensive plan. So again, not every community has planning and zoning. So let's just say in communities that do have planning and zoning, having a goal for permanent farmland protection in that county is critically important because it gives the community something to work towards, to look forward to, and to just catalyze all of the resources that are available to get that land base under protection through conservation easements or through one of these other tools we were talking about, to have that land base to retain the agricultural industries and businesses and agritourism in those communities. If you don't have comprehensive planning, this is something that your fiscal court or other elected body may decide to lead on. That, if a community has X number of acres in it as a landmass, that they have an opportunity to have that goal for permanent farmland protection. So that's all that that I have to share on this slide. But I think we have time to take a few questions. Chris, do we have any questions?
We have one, Billy. So I would encourage folks, if you have any other questions, please to go ahead and put them in. And again, the way to do that is where you see that questions line on the control panel. On the right side of it, you see a box with an arrow. If you click on that, that will open it up and you can pop a question in there. So the one question that we have, and I'll direct it to you, Billy, is how can a community that doesn't have a farmland protection program move forward with creating one? What are some of the first steps?
Great question, Chris. Thank you for asking that. So generally, it involves a leader in that community, just assembling some key stakeholders that represent a broad cross-section, such as representatives from Farm Bureau, from the land conservation community, from the local Chamber of Commerce, from the real estate community, from the home building community, and from historic preservation and neighborhoods. All of those groups have something to gain by having the balance between the urban and the rural. So assembling together and charging them with developing a plan for the future of agriculture in that community. And in some communities, this is known as a rural land management plan. If you want to look at a good example of this process and one of those plans, you can search Google Lexington, Fayette, Kentucky, a rural land management plan. They just updated this plan in 2017, but it was adopted in 1999. And it was adopted in response to a proliferation of large lot development in that county, over 4,700 acres of 10-acre lots, and that they knew that they had to do something. And so the mayor at that time appointed a group of people to put together a plan, and they knew that they had to do something because 4,700 acres would typically net 20,000 typical residential lots, but instead they only got 429. So this is what Chris was talking about earlier, the erosive effect of low density residential when you can get so many more houses on building in a compact, continuous way. So once you have that plan, it's going to take some time, but you start holding public meetings, get key stakeholders and community leaders in the room together and talk about what are the things that the community wants to protect going forward. And having someone either from GIS or from planning, you have a planning staff or engineering staff on that group, and someone from the city's or county's legal staff in the room to kind of monitor and support those meetings, to keep everyone on track. And then at the end of the day, such a plan would have some recommendations, but ultimately the plan is something that can be adopted. Even if you have planning and zoning, it can be adopted as a chapter in your comprehensive plan update. It can also be adopted, even if you don't have planning and zoning, as a guiding document. We all know that guiding documents are living, breathing things, and they're not going to stay the same over time. And this plan that I'm speaking of has been updated, and all plans should be updated, but it's a guiding document that really guides every decision that comes before a leadership body that may impact the rural area one way or the other. So that's an involved answer, but generally that's how it works.
Great. Thank you so much, Billy. We have one more question, which is where can we get access to today's information in order to share with our local officials? And I would say a couple of things to that. Number one, we will be back in touch. You will have an email from Billy soon with a link to the webinar recording that you can share with anybody. Those 2-page summary documents, again, we hope that you will use those as the basis for information. And beyond that, we are here to help you, and it's a perfect segue, and so I appreciate the question, because these 2 resources right here I want to talk about. They're not the only 2 resources. We have many others, and we have a great deal of staff expertise. But the Farmland Information Center has a wealth of information on it for folks who are interested in working at the community level to save farmland. It has, as Billy was just talking about, the sort of process, how to create local plans, how to think about creating a local, what we call Purchase of Ag Conservation Easement or PACE program. All of those kinds of, that kind of information can be found on the Farmland Information Center. They also have an Ask an Expert. If you have any question, whether that's about planning and zoning, whether it's about agricultural easements, whether it's about other aspects of farmland protection or planning or land access, please feel free to reach out to them. They are our technical experts. Obviously, Billy is, well, actually, I'm going to turn it over to you, Billy, to talk a little bit more about what are the resources available through the Southeast. But let me say a little bit more about the National Agricultural Land Network. Helping folks engage at the local and community level is part of the mission of the network. And so we encourage folks to join to help be able to ask questions and to learn from other folks around the country. We are increasing our programming. We are hoping to do a lot more around planning for agriculture. It is a great place to meet people who may not know a whole lot about farmland protection and are eager to learn. So it is free. You can see that website right there, the URL. Please feel free to join. We would welcome any and all new members. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Billy, who can talk a little bit more about resources from his perspective. But please know we are here to help. We want to help. That's why we're doing these, and you can be in touch with any of us. But Billy, to you to close us out.
Thanks, Chris. American Farmland Trust has been working across the U.S. for over 40 years, and we've been working intentionally across the Southeast for a significant period of that 4-decade time span. Most recently, we have added 6 full-time staff in the Southeast, and we have a total of 8 staff living in the Southeast. I'm based in Kentucky and travel across the Southeast and Texas. We are also hiring a Southeast Regional Director that will be, that hire will be announced later this fall. And so just know that we're here to provide programmatic support and resources. That's our role, but we're also interested in partnering with communities across the Southeast at the county level or at the state level to protect farmland, keep farmers on the land, and to really support sound farming practices. But our mission is so big, and we have 1 billion acres of farmland in this country, and about 150 people on staff, and certainly the Southeast is a priority, and our data shows that. So we have initiatives around climate, carbon sequestration, as Chris mentioned, solar, this project, Next Generation Farmers, Women for the Land, and the list goes on. So we encourage you to get to join the National Ag Land Network if you haven't already, and to check out our websites for more information, and to please reach out to me and ask me questions. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to working with all of you in the future. Have a nice afternoon.